almond chocolate on my sandwich, and then I'll make a puzzle, and then I'll get you big. That's the best I got.
All right, guys, I want to welcome you back. Thanks for joining me. I am here live tonight with my lovely kid. This is something that helps us make sure that we don't go over time. Again, I know we're all super busy because we're parents and we have a lot going on. So she's here to keep time. Okay, so I'm here live. If anybody has any questions, you can just drop them in the chat and I'll answer them. But I will get started with some questions I got after last week's episode. So last week we talked about getting your kid involved in the kitchen when they don't want to. And we touched a little bit on what happens when you yourself as the parent don't really like doing the cooking. And so I got a question about best ways to organize yourself in the kitchen. And I thought that was a really great question because that, in my opinion, is where the real problem lies. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I spent years working in a professional kitchen, like Michelin stars. I live in LA. If you're just joining us, you can just let me know where you live. So I live in LA, and we have a very, very exciting food scene here. So I'm used to working in very high stress, demanding situations. But then when I come home and I'm trying to get my kids involved in the kitchen, it's just as crazy, honestly, as it is cooking in like a James Beard chef's kitchen. So what I can really talk to is how to organize yourself as if you're a chef, as if you are walking into the kitchen to serve 500 people, even though you're really just cooking with your kid. So the first thing I tell people to do is to prepare. When I work in the kitchen, the first thing I do, honestly, is get everything together. And that means getting together all of your tools, your spoons, your spatulas, your knives, your whisks, everything. Cutting boards, pots, pans, everything. It means getting together all of your ingredients. And a lot of times people will get, like the ingredient is flour, so they will get a large bag of flour. But that's not really going to help when you have kids, because what are the kids going to do? They're going to stick their hands in the flour, they're going to sprinkle it all over the place, and it's really going to turn into a mess and a lot of stress. So what you really want to do is do something called mise en place, which means you get everything in its place. The flour in a bag is not flour in its place. What you want instead is the exact amount of flour measured out in a separate bowl. And then when you start cooking and you get up to the flour, it's not going to be a whole disaster of trying to have your 3-year-old or your 10-year-old try and measure flour. They're not very good at that. And so we don't really want to have them do it. And then I always get this as a follow-up question. If I'm measuring out all the ingredients before my kid gets in the kitchen, it's less fun. They really love scooping. They really love measuring. They really love whatever. Great. Anybody cooking, no matter what they're doing, should do it in 2 stages. Stage 1 is the preparation, and stage 2 is the execution. So start teaching that to your kid and have them join you in the kitchen and say something like, we're going to get ready for cooking. And that means we are going to measure out everything. Do you want to help me measure out all the ingredients? And so then they get to do the measuring. And then once you have all of your ingredients and you've put away everything that you don't need, which is very important, you want to be a minimalist when you're cooking, then you move on to step 2, which is now let's execute the recipe. Let's put it together. So I highly encourage parents to turn cooking into 2 steps. Step 1 being the prep, step 2 being the execution. So often when we're cooking, even without our kids, we try to combine them both. And the recipe will say like, put a tablespoon of oil in the pot. So we have oil, we have a tablespoon, and we measure it directly into the pot. That might be okay, but really what you should do is measure out your oil beforehand. So that when it says put oil in the pot, that is literally the only thing you're doing. Recipes are written so that the measurements and ingredients comes first, and that really is a sign that that's our first step. So the best thing I can recommend for people cooking with their kids, cooking without their kids, in the kitchen in general, is to divide your cooking into 2 steps and engage your child in both. And then I got another great question this week, which is, my kid doesn't like cooking. Again, a lot of people seems to be a theme. My kid doesn't like cooking. What are some of the reasons I should get them in the kitchen? Now, oh my gosh, put that down. I'm somebody who cooks. Like, I think cooking is very important for a lot of reasons, but the main one is that if you want your child to become an independent adult, they're going to have to know how to feed themselves. So cooking is a life skill in the same way that reading is a skill, in the same way that addition is a skill, in the same way that
Look at my nose.
in the same way that doing laundry is a skill. So cooking is important because it's a life skill. And if no other reason, if there's no other benefit, then your child leaves your home and knows how to feed themselves well every day, then that's good enough. There's also a lot of additional benefits that come along with cooking. Some of my favorites are, it's really the best way to teach healthy eating, which kind of goes along with being an independent adult and being able to take care of yourself. It's that you will raise a person who knows how to control certain aspects of their diet, and they're not going to be reliant on convenience food or takeout. They're going to really know how to eat well, and they're going to be comfortable in the kitchen, and they're going to be confident in their skills in the kitchen. So that's where it leads into this lifelong healthy eating. A lot of people say things like, oh, cooking, it's so great because you can work on math, you can work on reading, you can work on vocabulary, which is absolutely true. But those are skills that can be worked on in so many different ways. You know, you don't have to cook to work on math. You can do Legos. You can, count anything. You can art, you can use so many different subjects to reinforce academics from school. It's much harder to teach nutrition and to teach a person how to feed themselves if you're not actually doing it. So that's the biggest reason I think cooking is important. If you are an educator, there are definitely ways you can pull education into cooking, such as the math, the counting, the reading, the vocabulary building, this sequencing, which is really important in young children, which is this concept of first, second, last, which is something that we have to know how to do in order to organize ourselves, something that was really important in cooking too. Just like I was saying before, first we measure the ingredients, then we execute the recipe. So learning how to do that is also important for fine motor skills. If you have a child who needs to work on their writing, you can do cooking. But these are all secondary things. Like, I spent years in a restaurant. I will tell you, I did not learn a single bit of math there. My vocabulary did not grow at all working in a kitchen. However, my organizational skills got insanely good. So cooking is good for those kinds of things. And that's really the reason I highly recommend teaching your child to cook. And by cook, I really mean just being confident and comfortable in the kitchen. Okay, well, that is my signal that I need to go. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back next week. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can always just message me, and I'm happy to address them. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you.